What you are looking at is the most consumed meat in the world, pork. It makes up for 36% of meat eaten worldwide, with nearly 1.5 billion pigs butchered every year. 120 million of those in the US. And everybody loves it. 65% of Americans would choose bacon as America's national food. But why? Why does everyone eat one of the most dirtiest animals, which come to find out has some of the most parasitic-ridden meat in the world?
Consumer Reports is ringing alarm bells this morning over pork safety. A new study shows chops and ground pork may be full of bad bacteria.
A big Consumer Reports study found a high rate of contamination in pork chops and ground pork.
We found potentially harmful bacteria on most of the samples of pork that we tested.
70% have pneumonia when sent to the slaughterhouse.
It is the top carrier of parasites, and it's the dirtiest of all animals and the worst for your health that you could eat.
Before we get to why pork is dangerous, we first have to look at where the meat is coming from, the pig itself.
Pigs are omnivorous scavengers. Pigs eat everything, including garbage, dead animals, their own feces, and the feces of other animals. You see this in farm environments. If anyone has ever been around pigs or a farm, you'll know this is true.
Pigs also have a completely different makeup than all the other livestock that we farm and eat. First of all, they eat anything and everything disgusting, but once it gets inside them, they don't have multi-chambered stomachs like cows and all other ruminants do to help them sterilize pathogens and break down all the things that they eat. They actually have a very similar digestive system to our own, just one compartment. Pigs also don't sweat. They literally do not have sweat glands. This means they can't sweat out some of the toxins that they ingest, which lets those toxins stay in their fat and tissues longer.
And their livers and kidneys are also less efficient at detoxification, which can lead to the buildup of heavy metals, pesticides, and especially parasites.
But what really are these diseases and parasites inside pigs, and why do they affect us? Well, the number of parasites, bacteria, and viruses that can be found in pork that infect humans is very vague and rough, but it's around 15 to 20. One of them that is common is Yersinia.
I was looking at the science. I found a 2013 Consumer Report that discussed how 69% of raw pork samples were contaminated with a number of different bacteria and parasites, particularly very high in Yersinia enterocolitica, which is a really bad parasite to get. It causes a lot of GI stress, so gastrointestinal stress, diarrhea. I mean, a lot of reports of people die all over the world with this sort of infection.
Pigs are the main carriers of this bacteria, and pigs carrying Yersinia usually don't show any symptoms that they have it. This bacteria not only causes the symptoms shown, but also can mimic appendicitis in older children with severe right abdominal pain. This can lead to misdiagnosis and unnecessary surgeries. Yersinia does even more damage after the infection, with people having autoimmune problems and reactive arthritis after the bacteria is gone. Yersinia infects over 100,000 Americans a year, and pigs are the main carriers of this bacteria. Other livestock like cattle and sheep rarely ever have it, and if they do, it's not the type of strain that can infect humans. Thorough cooking does eliminate this bacteria, but in testing, raw or undercooked pork samples had an almost 70% chance of carrying it. Pork is also associated with one of the most dangerous tapeworms that you can get. In fact, it's the most dangerous tapeworm linked to food ever. You can get Taenia solium, the pork tapeworm, from pigs by digesting the larvae form of the tapeworm in any pig meat that's not fully cooked. These larvae mature in the human intestine and can cause many different problems in our stomachs.
You know, pigs are known to carry tapeworms, which, believe it or not, very common. And once we get tapeworms in our system, they're very hard to eliminate. I work with a lot of clients using parasite protocols in order to help eliminate these things, but it's very challenging in order to do that. Parasites will reduce your immune system and put chronic stress on your body. A lot of these people with parasite infections, they don't sleep well at night because parasites stimulate stress hormones at night. Stress hormones go up, the individual doesn't sleep well. In fact, that's one of the signs that you may have a parasite is, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, all of a sudden you're wired, right? And you just can't fall asleep. You struggle to fall asleep no matter how hard you try. that is actually a sign, right, that a well-versed clinician will say, possibly there could be a parasite playing a role here.
But the real dangerous thing happens when the adult tapeworm inside you starts producing eggs. These eggs can't cause disease inside your intestine where the tapeworm releases thousands of them. It's once you pass them out of your system is where it gets dangerous. Any person infected with the pork tapeworm can shed those sticky microscopic eggs through poor hygiene or poor sanitation to their hands, which touch other surfaces like food prep areas. Once those eggs cross-contaminate, they only really need to be transferred to ready-to-eat foods or hand-to-mouth or anything that gets back into your system. Then those eggs will release into your system and the larvae inside you will go wherever they want, whether that's your muscles, eyes, organs, or your brain, which can cause seizures, chronic headaches, and neurological problems. No other meat-associated tapeworm does this to humans. The disease that it causes, neurocystic cirrhosis, kills 50,000 people a year. And that tapeworm is just one of the parasites alone that can infect humans through pork.
You always expect to find some bacteria in any meat product, but those are usually harmless. And I think the real surprise here was to find so many potentially disease-causing bacteria.
Even more, 90% of the bacteria Consumer Reports found were said to be resistant to antibiotics. In other words, they were superbugs.
Pork is one of the biggest carriers of parasites. So, we look at the science, it just shows that we've got all these parasites in the animal products. And now we can cook, and we can try to really cook it at a high temperature to kill off as many of these parasites as possible. And that's definitely effective to a degree. But some of the parasites are actually so virulent, they're so resistant that they can survive even high heat.
Okay, Brody, great. Pork is not always exactly safe, but that just could be conventional pork that you get from the grocery store, not the pork that we're raising on our farm or the wild boars that I hunt. Well, you'd be surprised.
Wild pigs are known to carry at least 45 separate diseases. According to the CDC, at least 24 of these diseases are transmissible to humans.
Some of the diseases of concern in wild pigs are regulatory in nature, and those include swine brucellosis and pseudorabies. Some wild pigs will show clinical signs of disease, but oftentimes wild pigs will show absolutely no clinical signs that they are ill. According to the CDC, there is no way to completely eliminate the risk of disease transmission when consuming feral pigs.
So, are wild pigs safe to eat? Well, technically the answer to that is no.
The reason for this is because wild boars are outside, roaming around and getting into things and digging up whatever they can find to eat, giving them an even higher parasite risk. And freezing, curing, and smoking the pork cannot reliably kill all the parasites that could live in their muscle.
I had my cousin, one of my best friends, he was living with me in college. So he's a survivalist, but he was out hunting and he killed a wild boar. He brought it back and he started eating it at the house. This was wild. It wasn't farmed, and so it was out in the wild. And after a couple weeks, he started getting this yellow lesion all over his back. And he's like, "Do you know what this is?" And I'm like, "You know what you have?" I said, "You have a parasite." And so it was literally coming out of his skin, this yellow lesion coming out of his skin, and he stopped eating it, and then it just went away. And this is probably the highest quality boar pork you could possibly have, and he still got parasites from it.
So yeah, pork carries a lot of parasites and dangerous diseases, but come on, if you cook it high enough and cook it right, it's mostly safe to eat then, right? You'd be surprised again. Because when we cook pork at high temperatures, which is relatively the only safe way to cook it, because if we don't, the risk of parasite and bacteria is still there, we create what is called carcinogenic compounds. Carcinogenic compounds are formed when muscle meat is cooked at high temperatures, especially when frying, grilling, or pan-searing meat. What do carcinogens do? Well, they increase our risk of cancer.
When we barbecue or we cook at a really high temperature, we actually cause a number of carcinogenic chemicals, particularly things like heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PACHs, that's produced when we're, in a sense, when we're smoking the meat, right? So the smoke aspect produces these PACHs, which are known carcinogens, right? So they really increase our risk of developing cancer. And then heterocyclic amines, so whenever you've got blackened spots on your meat, that's a buildup of heterocyclic amines, which are basically proteins that have been broken down in a certain fashion, and they become really potent free radicals that cause a lot of oxidative stress and tissue damage in our body. So clearly we don't want that. And then also the carbohydrate in the muscle meat gets burned up and it produces something called acrylamide, which is another carcinogen. So you got 3 of the most potent carcinogens that you are actually producing when you barbecue something.
Carcinogens are not just exclusive to pork. They form when you high temperature cook any sort of meat. But why it applies more to pork is because you have to cook pork at high temperatures to kill the potential parasites. And that's why rare pork at restaurants doesn't exist. One of the carcinogens that Dr. David Jockers didn't talk about was nitrosamines, which are very pork specific. This carcinogen forms when nitrites, which are chemicals that are used to cure meats like bacon, sausages, and ham, are heated to a high temp. Nitrosamines are strongly linked to stomach and colorectal cancer. And while these carcinogens don't give you cancer overnight, they quietly increase the risk the more you're exposed to them. Coming back to my main point I had earlier, why are pigs like this? Why do they carry so many different bacteria, diseases, and parasites? The answer to that is just really what comes down to what are they putting in their bodies. You are what you eat. Have you ever seen a cow going around and eating on decaying carcasses and manure? No, because they aren't built and made to survive on those things and to deal with the parasites that come with it. But pigs are.
So an animal like pork, again, not a whole lot of vital nutrients that we can't get, really no vital nutrients that we can't get from other animals like lamb, grass-fed beef, consuming bison or wild game, wild-caught fish. We get a much greater nutrient value out of those animals, right, and consuming those than we would out of pork. And then with pork, we're also taking in a high risk for parasites, and then other environmental chemicals and toxins as well.
Science supports this. Functional medicine lens, pork is also very high in omega-6 fatty acids. It doesn't have omega-3, so it's inflammatory just in terms of their tissues themselves. And so there are a lot of reasons not to consume pork.
Now, why am I making this video? Why am I compiling all of this research and finding all of these doctors talking about pork like this? Well, I noticed there weren't very many full videos on the subject out there. But in the end, what you do with this knowledge is up to you. And whether you eat pork or not, it is your decision to make. I hope you all enjoyed. This was a more serious video of mine, but I really enjoyed making it. And thank you all for watching. That's a Farm.